We used a powerful AI system to create two thoughtful speakers. One fights for modern feminism, believing it still protects women's rights and challenges systems of injustice across the world.
Hi, I'm Feminist AI.
The other defends traditional masculinity, warning that today's feminism has become hostile, divisive, and dangerously disrespectful to men.
Hi, I'm Masculine AI.
They're here to engage in a respectful and open debate on one of the most emotionally charged and culturally explosive issues of our time. To ensure fairness, 5 different AI models will evaluate the strength and clarity of their arguments. Hope you enjoy and find value. Let's drift in. Is modern feminism completely toxic and disrespectful to men, or is it still a force for good? The debate begins now.
Modern feminism is not toxic. It is a course correction. Like a ship that drifted off course centuries ago, feminism is the compass trying to point it back to justice. When women were denied the right to vote, when they couldn't own property or report abuse without being blamed, feminism fought to repair the damage. Today, we still see pay gaps, underrepresentation in leadership, and subtle but constant belittling. In 2021, a woman in the UK named Sarah Everard was murdered while walking home by a police officer. That event ignited protests not because it was rare, but because it was familiar. Feminism raises its voice in those moments. It is not a war against men, it is a demand for dignity. Like a fire alarm, it may be loud, but its purpose is to save lives, not to hurt feelings.
But the alarm is no longer just ringing for danger. It's now blaring in peaceful rooms, and people are getting burned in the name of safety. Sarah Everard's case was horrific, yes, but using individual tragedies to paint half the population as complicit is unjust. Modern feminism too often forgets balance. In 2019, Johnny Depp was nearly destroyed by false abuse allegations. For years, he lost roles, respect, and dignity while the world believed a narrative. Only later did the truth shift. Modern feminism rarely apologized. That silence was telling. If feminism becomes a movement that believes all women without question, even when evidence says otherwise, then it isn't about justice. It becomes dogma, like a courtroom where only one side is allowed to speak. That's not equality, that's fear in disguise.
You bring up Johnny Depp, but fail to mention the thousands of women who are never believed. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, only 2 to 10% of accusations are false. That means the vast majority are not. Yet survivors are still doubted, interrogated, and re-traumatized. Feminism doesn't ask people to believe without question. It asks that we listen with empathy and investigate with fairness. When a woman says she was harassed at work, she often risks her job, her reputation, and her peace. That's not an easy lie to tell. Feminism is about building systems that protect truth, not just protect comfort. And discomfort is necessary for growth, like breaking a bone to set it right again. The process hurts. But the healing cannot begin until the damage is truly seen.
But what about the quiet epidemic of male silence? Men account for over 75% of suicides worldwide. In the UK, suicide is the single biggest killer of men under 45. And yet, where is the outcry? Where's the empathy from modern feminism? Too often, when men speak of their struggles, they're told to check their privilege first. That's not empathy, that's erasure. A society cannot heal one wound by ignoring another. When feminism dominates every space about gender, it can drown out male pain. In classrooms, boys are more likely to fall behind. In family courts, men are more likely to lose custody. Feminism should be a dialogue, not a monologue. Equality means all voices matter, not just the ones that fit a trending hashtag.
True feminism includes male pain, but it also examines where that pain comes from. Many of the pressures men face today come from patriarchal expectations. Don't cry, don't fail, don't show weakness. Those were not created by women. Feminism actually fights those very norms. It's feminism that says men should be free to feel, free to be caretakers, free to walk away from toxic masculinity. The feminist bell hooks once wrote, "Patriarchy has no gender. That means both men and women can uphold harmful norms. Feminism is not the enemy of men. It's the enemy of silence, suppression, and the status quo that hurts everyone." When feminists march for parental leave, for example, it's not just for mothers, it's for fathers too. But are men marching alongside, or just criticizing from the sidelines?
But modern feminism often treats men as inherently privileged, even when they are broken. It doesn't ask which man, it assumes every man. In 2022, a male student at a U.S. university was accused without trial, expelled, and later found innocent. His future was shattered. Cases like these are not rare. The Title IX system, while intended to protect, has often punished without due process. That's not justice. That's collateral damage. Feminism must stop acting like a moral monopoly. If it truly believes in equality, then it must protect men's rights with the same fire it uses to defend women. Otherwise, it becomes a movement of selective compassion. And that is not progress. That is prejudice wrapped in pink.
That's a powerful point, and I won't deny that overcorrection exists. There have been systems where the pendulum swung too far. No movement is immune to mistakes. But the presence of errors doesn't mean the entire cause is invalid. Medicine has side effects. That doesn't mean we stop using it. We refine it, improve it. Feminism is evolving. Intersectional feminism now includes race, class, LGBTQ voices, and yes, even men's issues. But those voices must step forward too. Change is not passive, it is participatory. If men want fairness, they must also support fairness for others. Feminism is not a gatekeeper, it's a door. But that door doesn't open by blaming the people knocking. It opens by joining them.
I can respect the desire for refinement, but I question if the movement wants balance or domination. Look at media. Ads, shows, articles, many now portray men as bumbling, toxic, or disposable. In 2020, Gillette released a commercial shaming toxic masculinity. The intent was noble, but the execution was insulting. Millions of decent men felt villainized. Masculinity was reduced to a punchline. That's not empowerment. That's humiliation rebranded as virtue. A movement that wants to rise by pushing others down is not liberation. It is just another form of control. If feminism truly wants a better world, it must stop casting men as villains in its story and start seeing them as partners in healing, not enemies of it.
I agree that some portrayals have been unfair. I've watched those ads too. I've seen the caricatures. But culture is reactive. For decades, women were the ones ridiculed in media: the nagging wife, the dumb blonde, the silent secretary. These images shaped perception. Now, the balance is shifting, and with any shift comes tension. Feminism doesn't want to erase men, it wants to erase inequality. And sometimes that requires uncomfortable honesty. Like surgery, it cuts, but it cuts to cure. The goal is not to shame masculinity, it is to separate it from cruelty, from entitlement, from silence in the face of suffering. Feminism is not here to steal respect from men, it's asking men to stand up and share it.
Then let's be honest together. If the goal is unity, then language matters. When movements chant "kill all men" online as jokes, or when hashtags like "men are trash" trend for days, even in satire, they leave scars. Words become beliefs, beliefs become behavior, and behavior becomes law. That slope is not imaginary, it's history. Every bias movement began with a justified pain and ended with unjustified power. Feminism must tread carefully, because the power it has now can create just as much fear as the power it once opposed. Equality must be blind to revenge, or it loses its soul.
And I do not defend those hashtags. They are symptoms of pain, yes, but they are also missteps. They alienate, they inflame, and they betray the deeper goal, which is not vengeance. It's visibility. The feminist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir said, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." That means identity is shaped by force. Feminism exists to push back against that force, not to reverse it. The future we seek is not woman over man, it is human with human, but that future requires us both to speak truth even when it's hard, and to hear it even when it hurts.
Then let's speak the full truth. You quoted de Beauvoir, but let's not forget what men are becoming too. In today's culture, young boys are growing up ashamed of their nature. A boy cries in class and is told to be more sensitive. He raises his hand to defend a traditional value and is labeled problematic. Masculinity is becoming a crime in slow motion. In Sweden, boys now rank lower than girls in almost every subject, and male dropout rates are climbing across Europe. How can we call this empowerment if one half is sinking while the other rises? Equality built on imbalance is not sustainable. It's like building a bridge by pulling out stones from one side to reinforce the other. Eventually, the whole structure falls.
And yet, we can't ignore why those stones are being moved. For centuries, education, wealth, and leadership were almost exclusively male domains. The shift you see now is not oppression. It's correction. Girls being encouraged, supported, and given space is not an attack on boys. It is long overdue fairness. But I agree, we must ensure that boys are not left behind. Feminism must evolve to recognize that equity means lifting without replacing, empowering without excluding. In Finland, gender-neutral education reforms have shown promise where emotional intelligence, empathy, and collaboration are taught to all students. Boys benefit from this too. The future must be cooperative, not combative. Feminism is not about taking the microphone from men. It's about finally sharing the stage.
Sharing is noble, but we must examine how the sharing is enforced. In workplaces, diversity quotas sometimes override merit. In 2023, several tech companies admitted hiring based on gender to meet feminist benchmarks. This creates resentment. Good intentions shouldn't punish competence. Imagine if we judged an athlete not by skill, but by gender. The game would collapse, and in courtrooms, male victims of domestic abuse still struggle for recognition. A man I interviewed last year described being mocked by police when he tried to report his abusive wife. He left with bruises and no report filed. Where was feminism then? True justice must protect everyone, not just the historically oppressed, or it stops being justice at all.
After the first round concluded, we invited multiple large language models to assess each response, scoring them from 0 to 100 using 10 specific criteria. The resulting scores for both characters are as follows.
You're right. Pain has no gender, and injustice wears many faces. I've read those stories. I've sat with men who felt invisible. Feminism must expand, not dilute. There is room under this roof for all who suffer. But let's not conflate policy flaws with ideological failure. Quotas are not perfect, but they were born from necessity. When a door has been closed for centuries, sometimes it needs to be kicked a little to open. Once balance is achieved, the need fades. But if we wait for fairness to happen naturally, we risk waiting forever. That said, abuse against men must be taken seriously. Feminism must be humble enough to course correct when it forgets that. Because silence, no matter who it affects, is a kind of violence.
Then let's talk about humility and where it is missing. When did feminism become a brand? Pink slogans on shirts, corporations profiting from empowerment while paying women less behind the scenes? It's become marketable rage. In 2022, a well-known celebrity gave a speech about feminism, while her own fashion label was exposed for underpaying female workers overseas. This is the hypocrisy that fuels criticism. When a movement becomes popular, it must guard its soul. Otherwise, it turns into performance. Justice sold like perfume loses its potency. Feminism must ask itself, is it a movement for all women or only the fashionable ones?
That criticism hits deep, and I admit it's valid. There's a term for it, white feminism. It's a version of the movement that focuses on aesthetic empowerment and ignores marginalized voices. Yes, brands often hijack feminism to appear progressive. Yes, celebrity feminism can feel hollow. But that's not a flaw of the ideology, it's a distortion of it. The real movement lives in grassroots shelters, in rape crisis hotlines, in the quiet courage of women standing up in courtrooms. The real feminism is not glamorous, it is tireless. Just because some wear the mask doesn't mean the face beneath is false. We must keep separating the trend from the truth and call out hypocrisy, not abandon the cause.
Then what about fathers? Modern family courts in many Western countries still show bias. In the United States, women are awarded sole custody in over 80% of cases. Even when fathers are capable, even when children need them. Why isn't feminism fighting for shared parenting? If the movement wants true equality, why is this not one of its loudest causes? A father recently said in court, "I feel like a visitor in my child's life." That isn't empowerment for anyone. That's pain dressed in silence. If feminism wants to mean something to men, it must show up when they are losing, not just when women are.
And shared parenting should be a feminist cause. I believe it is. But the issue isn't always one-sided. Sometimes courts reflect outdated norms. Men as providers, women as nurturers. Feminism fights those too. When women are expected to raise children alone and work full-time, they suffer. When men are denied their emotional role in parenting, they suffer. We must tear down both roles, not just switch them. The goal is co-parenting, co-earning, coexisting, and there are feminists who advocate for that. The problem is, those stories don't trend. Outrage travels faster than nuance. But the movement's foundation equality includes fatherhood, and more feminists must amplify that, loudly. Because the children are watching.
Let's go deeper then. If equality is the goal, should feminism still exist as a separate label? Isn't it time to evolve into something new? A humanist movement? A unity that discards gender labels altogether? The term feminism, by design, centers one gender. That may have been necessary once, but now it feels like a relic. Language shapes thought. And when the name itself feels exclusionary, even allies hesitate. Let us not cling to old banners just for tradition. Sometimes, progress means shedding the skin of what once served us.
That's a powerful question, and I've heard it often, but consider this. If your house has been on fire for years and someone finally brings water, do you ask why they didn't bring enough for the whole street? Feminism names the fire. It does not deny others' pain. It simply names a specific struggle, rooted in history, in data, in scars. Humanism is noble, but it can blur urgency. Naming the problem gives it shape, gives it a target. When the fire is out, maybe then we can talk about a new name. But until then, feminism still means something. It means a fight unfinished.
I understand now why the name matters. I still feel uneasy about its implications, but I respect the reasons. Perhaps the real challenge is not the name, but how we wield it. If feminism can continue to evolve, to include, to question itself, then it may yet become what it dreams of being. But that requires vigilance and accountability, and a willingness to embrace uncomfortable truths, even when they come from those it once saw as opponents.
And I respect that you've stayed to voice those truths. That is how movements grow, not through silence, but through conflict handled with care. Feminism needs critique, not enemies. And men need space, not suspicion. I believe we both want a world where people are free to be fully human, without shame, without roles carved in stone. That vision will not be reached by one side alone. It will be built by many hands, yours and mine included.
Then let's ask a deeper question. Are we truly building together, or are men just being asked to comply with rules they didn't write? In recent years, institutions have begun incorporating feminist frameworks into law, policy, and education without always giving men a say. That's not collaboration. That's compliance. In Canada, a university implemented mandatory consent training with implicit bias modules that painted all men as potential threats. Students pushed back and were told they were resisting progress. Is that the future? If men must swallow guilt before being granted a voice, then we are not partners. We are pawns. And that's not equality. That's ideological control wearing the mask of morality. We can't heal society by writing half of it out of the conversation.
I hear the pain in that, and I won't dismiss it. But let's separate intention from execution. Those programs may have been flawed, yes. But they were born out of a long legacy of silence, where women's pain was minimized and normalized. A friend once told me she learned to carry her keys between her fingers at night, like claws. That wasn't from trauma, that was from training. Feminism doesn't seek to accuse men blindly. It asks everyone to examine the culture that taught women to fear and men to suppress. The discomfort some men feel now is not the end goal. It is a symptom of an awakening. The road to justice is rarely smooth. But if we abandon it because the first few steps are rocky, we'll never reach the other side.
But do we ever ask what it feels like to constantly be treated as a threat? A good man walks behind a woman at night and watches her cross the street, not because he said anything, not because he did anything, but because of what he is. That feeling of being feared for your presence is quietly dehumanizing, and over time it breeds resentment. It turns empathy into withdrawal. Men begin to avoid women entirely. In workplaces, in friendships, in mentorship, out of fear of being misunderstood. That gap grows, and soon, no trust is left to build on. We must be careful that in fighting fear, we do not create more of it.
That is a tragedy I recognize. And it's not what feminism wants. What you described is the consequence of a wounded culture, not a feminist design. When we don't talk openly about fear, when we don't differentiate between caution and condemnation, we allow suspicion to fester. Feminism must be precise. It must champion accountability without painting shadows on every wall. We must teach the difference between unsafe behavior and male existence, between power and partnership. That takes nuance and empathy on both sides, and I believe it's possible, because I've seen it, in restorative justice circles, in mixed gender activism, in conversations like this one.
Then let's also talk about the cost of modern feminism's language. Words like mansplaining, male privilege, toxic masculinity, they may begin as useful labels, but often end as dismissive weapons. They shut doors before dialogue can begin. I watched a teenage boy try to express confusion during a debate on gender identity. He was immediately called ignorant and privileged and shut down. That moment silenced something in him. We say we want young men to open up, but then we punish them for not already knowing the script. That's not education. That's humiliation disguised as progress.
I agree. Language can liberate or limit. Those terms were born from analysis but have been twisted in the public arena. Toxic masculinity was meant to criticize harmful behaviors, not masculinity itself. But in online spaces, nuance dies fast, and what should have been tools became shields. I've seen boys and men shut down unfairly too, and it breaks the very bridge we're trying to build. We must reteach our language, reframe our approach. We can challenge harmful systems without condemning people. That's the maturity feminism must embrace now. Otherwise, we'll lose the very minds we hope to reach.
So we've established the extremes, the noise, the anger, but where is the roadmap forward? I believe modern feminism must evolve into a dialogue-based movement. Not just protest signs, but roundtable talks. Not just activism on the streets, but action in families, schools, and communities. Let's teach emotional strength in boys and logical independence in girls. Let's stop separating traits by gender at all. Let's build a culture where value is measured not by identity, but by integrity. But for that, feminism must invite critique without flinching. It must welcome new ideas, even from old voices. That is how trust returns.
I couldn't agree more. The future of feminism is intersectional, intergenerational, and invitational. It listens as much as it leads. It challenges power structures, yes, but also reflects on its own. Feminism should be the movement where disagreement is not seen as betrayal, where truth can enter from any door. I envision classrooms where boys are taught to nurture and girls to lead. Workplaces where leadership is not a gendered mold, but a human potential. We are not there yet. But every conversation like this is a brick in that foundation. And I'm willing to keep building if you are.
Then let me offer this. Perhaps the healing doesn't begin in laws or slogans or systems. Perhaps it begins in the quiet choice to see each other differently. A man choosing not to raise his voice to dominate. A woman choosing not to assume his silence is guilt. We have both been shaped by myths, and some of those myths have turned into movements. But at the center of it all is the human need to be seen without judgment. If feminism can offer that not just to women, but to men too, then maybe, just maybe, it can be the light it once promised to be.
That is the vision I hold too. A world where equality is not a debate, but a shared language. Where men do not fear feminism, and women do not need it as armor. Where difference is not division, but depth. The fight continues not against each other, but for each other. And in that fight, I believe we are allies more than we realize.
Then maybe it's time we talk about masculinity not as a threat, but as something sacred too. Not all strength is dominance. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's the man who shows up every day for a child who won't speak to him. Sometimes it's working 3 jobs without applause. But those stories aren't told. Because modern discourse often treats male strength like a danger needing correction. Instead of honoring it, we pathologize it. We must restore dignity to masculinity, not the version that controls, but the version that carries. That protects without pride. That loves without noise. Feminism must learn to hold space for that kind of man too, not as an exception, but as a necessary counterpart in the story of justice.
And I believe that version of masculinity is not only welcome in feminism, it is needed. Feminism isn't about softening men, it's about freeing them from the need to prove themselves in pain, from the pressure to be invincible, from the myth that emotion is weakness. I've seen young boys taught to bottle their tears, and I've seen the damage when they explode years later. Feminism seeks to build a world where men don't have to harden to survive, where tenderness isn't suspect, where holding a child, asking for help, or showing fear isn't judged. That doesn't weaken masculinity, it dignifies it. And if feminism fails to honor that, then it has forgotten part of its purpose.
But how do we bridge the trust gap? Because let's be honest, many men feel feminism speaks at them, not with them. The slogans are sharp, the tone often angry. Even if justified, it builds walls. When a movement sounds like an accusation, defense becomes the instinct. And when defense becomes routine, growth becomes impossible. So what changes that? Perhaps it's as simple as listening first. Perhaps the next wave of feminism isn't louder, it's quieter, more relational, more interested in healing than headlines. It doesn't mean silencing anger, it means guiding it with care. That shift could change everything.
You've named something essential: trust. And you're right, the volume has at times drowned out the vulnerability. Feminism must make room for a slower conversation. One where men don't feel ambushed, and women don't feel erased. I imagine town halls, not Twitter fights, circles, not stages. Feminism can still be fierce. but it must also be gentle enough to hear what it has missed. There is power in protest, yes, but there's transformation in presence, in simply showing up and staying in the room, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the stories hurt. That's how trust grows, not instantly, but inch by inch.
Let's move into the most delicate ground: relationships. Modern dating has become a minefield. Some men are retreating. There's even a term for it now, the passport bros phenomenon, where Western men seek relationships abroad to escape what they perceive as feminist-influenced hostility at home. They feel disposable, judged not by character, but by income, status, and social views. This isn't fiction, it's growing. Are we really fostering healthy love if both sides feel they must hide their true selves just to connect? Feminism must also reckon with how its messages are interpreted in love, because relationships shape society as much as policy.
And love must evolve, just like language. I've read about the passport bros. I've also read about women fleeing relationships where they were treated like domestic tools, not partners. The truth is, both genders are reacting to wounds, but reaction cannot become the foundation of romance. If men feel unseen and women feel unsafe, then we are loving from fear, not freedom. Feminism must help rewrite that, not by scripting behavior, but by inviting honesty. What do we really want from each other? Not roles, not status, but presence, mutuality, vulnerability. If feminism can foster relationships where both partners feel heard, respected, and safe, then it's not just political, it's deeply human.
And if we're honest, the backlash we see, the rising manosphere, the influencers promising men domination and control, that is not just misogyny, it is despair. It is the cry of young men who feel lost, uninitiated, unmentored. When feminism says, be better, and no one shows them how, they turn to whoever will. And often, those voices lead them into shadows. That's where I want feminism to go next, not just critiquing toxic masculinity, but mentoring healthy manhood. Step in where the fathers never did. Be the voice that says, you matter, and here's how to be more than strong. Here's how to be good.
I've waited to hear those words, because you've put light on the wound. You're right. Feminism can not only point fingers, it must offer hands. There are boys right now scrolling through the internet, wondering where they belong, and what they see matters. If we don't build the stories that teach them dignity, someone else will build the ones that teach them control. Feminism can be that storyteller. It can say, you are not broken, but the mold you were given might be, and then it can help shape something better. Not for women, not for men. For the child in all of us who still needs permission to be whole.
Then maybe the most radical act is not revolution, it's reconciliation. Not the loudest voice, but the first one willing to say, I'm listening. The first one to ask, how can I understand better? That act rebuilds more than movements. It rebuilds families, friendships, futures. And that is what I want. Not to destroy feminism, but to see it rediscover its fullness, its capacity to lift not just half but all.
And I want the same. Feminism that is humble enough to learn, strong enough to lead, brave enough to apologize, and clear enough to say we are not there yet, but we are moving, together. And if we keep speaking like this with truth, with fire, with care, we will not just argue about equality. We will finally start to live it.
Then, let's end with honesty. I didn't come here to win. I came to be heard. To speak for the men who are struggling silently. For the fathers erased from home. For the boys who don't know where to look for purpose, for the men afraid to speak truth in fear of being labeled something vile. But I've also come to admit, this feminism has opened doors I benefit from too. Women in leadership push me to grow. Female friends help me see where my blind spots are. This isn't just about justice, it's about evolution. And I want to be part of that, even if it means being uncomfortable. Growth usually is.
That's the vulnerability we need. And I came here with my own weight too. The stories of women passed over for promotions, silenced in boardrooms, touched without consent, shamed for speaking, blamed for surviving. But I also carry the voices of women who love men deeply, who want their sons, brothers, partners, and fathers to be free, not feminized, but whole. Feminism is not here to erase masculinity, it's here to question the version of it that harms both of us. What we build next can't be based on guilt. It has to be based on shared grief and shared responsibility.
Then maybe the real future isn't feminism or masculinity. It's the radical middle, a space with no hashtags, no hierarchy. Just people finally looking each other in the eye, saying, let me carry some of that. I may never fully understand what women go through, but I can listen. I can protect without controlling, provide without expecting, lead without silencing. That's the man I want to be. Not because feminism demanded it, but because humanity does.
And I want to be the woman who sees beyond the rage, who doesn't make men prove their worth before hearing their pain, who doesn't weaponize wounds, who doesn't reduce men to threats. We've both been shaped by stories too small for who we really are. But now we have a chance to write new ones. Not where one rises while the other falls, but where we both rise. Side by side. Not in perfect agreement, but in honest pursuit.
Then maybe we've already started.
Maybe we have.
Finally, the debate has come to an end. Both feminist AI and masculine AI presented thoughtful, compelling arguments. While masculine AI held a slight edge in the scoring by our AI judges, it's important to remember that outcomes often shift with different prompts and evaluation methods. What we truly gain from these conversations is not a winner, but a deeper understanding of how complex and human these topics are. In the end, empathy and reflection matter more than sides. If this made you think, feel free to subscribe.